When the main event of night 2 was over and Michael Cole shouted, "I love professional wrestling," I felt every bit of that. If this weekend taught me anything, it reminded me that professional wrestling is an art. And we as wrestling fans, we always get these comments from people saying, "You know it's fake, right?" Coming from people that think they're just so much more mature than everyone else. Whole time they're walking around smelling like a damn nasty patty. At this point, I don't care. Let these idiots miss out. Because right now is a great time to be a wrestling fan. When Cody hit that third crossroads, I knew it was over and all the emotions hit me at once. I've been a Roman Reigns fan since day one. From the Shield to the failed babyface run, and to see this heel turn and see this amazing title reign, and see how it's elevated him to absolute legendary status has been a great ride. But it was time for it to end, and it was beautiful. There's moments in wrestling history that I love, and I appreciate what those moments did for the business. But at the end of the day, I wasn't there for them. I wasn't there when Hogan slammed Andre, when the Austin era began. Hell, I was alive when Cena and Batista were crowned as the top guys, but I was like 2.5 years old and like 2 years away from actually watching wrestling. But the ending of Cody finally finishing his story, that's a moment for me that 10, 20 years from now, I'll be able to look back at it and say, I was there. An absolutely perfect main event to cap off WrestleMania weekend. But let's talk about everything else before we dive into that. First things first, I want to give a shout out to NXT because Stand and Deliver was an absolute blast to watch. If I can recommend anything from that show, it would be that triple threat match for the North American Championship because that was a 5-star car crash. Big E got his wish after all, man.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
But now, let's talk about WrestleMania 40 emanating from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Let's get into it. I thought night 1 for the most part was pretty solid. The vibes were definitely there and they wanted to start the show hot despite it being freezing cold in Philly. Becky and Rhea's opener was pretty solid all things considered. Becky came into this with a fever and strep throat. Me personally, I would have been laid out in my bed feeling sorry for myself. But here she is opening the biggest wrestling show of the year. So mad respect to her. But I will say, this motherfucker startled the hell out of me. Can I get a trigger warning next time, please? But I'm glad that Rhea Ripley ended up picking up the win. And I'm not gonna lie, I can honestly see her going into next WrestleMania with the championship still. Because at this point, if it's not Becky, who's gonna beat her? The 6-team ladder match for the tag titles was too much fun, man. Everyone had their time to shine. That air raid crash from the top of the ladder got me out of my chair. I will say that A-Town Down Under winning the tag titles was an interesting choice. They were honestly the last team I expected to win, not gonna lie. But I think we all knew Awesome Truth was gonna win the tag titles, and R-Truth finally got him a WrestleMania win, which was a very wholesome moment for him. But man, Jay, Jimmy, no yeet. That was easily the weakest brother versus brother match of the 3 at WrestleMania. If any match needed a stipulation, it was definitely this one. An 11-minute super kick fest. 17 in total. Yes, I counted. Shawn Michaels, you can't keep standing for this, man. Please, WWE, I beg you, never put these two in the ring against each other again. I love them both individually and as a team, obviously, but we do not need a rematch. Gunther losing the IC title to Sami Zayn caught me by surprise completely. That was the match I was 100% positive on the finish for. But the story they told from Sami walking backstage, passing by his family, Chad Gable, and finally Kevin Owens, all of them giving him that motivation for this match that he wasn't so certain about, was great stuff. And I mean, it's Gunther and it's Sami Zayn. It's almost impossible for them to have a bad match. Sami's selling here was impeccable, and it really makes me question how this man was a heel for 6 years. Sami getting beat down and coming back from all of that was an absolute shocker. But I think we can go ahead and crown Gunther as the greatest intercontinental champion of all time, but I think it's time for him to move up to the main event. Now, let's talk about the main event of night 1. Going into this WrestleMania season, I made it very clear how concerned I was for how good The Rock was going to be. The last time we saw him in a full-fledged match, it was 11 years ago, and let's just say, injuries happened and movies got delayed. But man, did The Rock look fantastic. This new character of the final boss has just made him so much more interesting. And for me, it's been the best stuff that he's done in the last 2 decades. I still think that the match went a little bit too long and it took forever before it actually got good, but when it did, it was very good. And I think the way they ended it was the perfect way to do it. Not only do you set up bloodline rules, so you can create some doubt on what the actual finish of the next night was going to be, but you also potentially set up a feud between The Rock and Cody Rhodes down the line. And man, what a perfect callback this camera shot was. I will say that this is the first 2-night Mania where I would say night 2 was better than night 1. I did think Seth and Drew was the better of the 2 opening matches that we had, but let me just say, can we go ahead and say that Seth Rollins was by far the MVP of WrestleMania 40? The man main evented night 1, opened night 2, and was a key piece of the main event of night 2. let's just give him his flowers now, man. And I'm glad that finally, after 4 years, Drew McIntyre was finally able to win a world title in front of fans. But this guy, man, he couldn't just end this without him gloating to CM Punk. Drew's obsession with Punk cost him his big moment because Punk's had enough of this, and now he's pissed. If you got that reference, huge salute to you. He stood up and started to beat down Drew, and as he's doing that, the memes came true. Damian Priest runs down with the referee and finally cashes in his Money in the Bank contract to win the world title. And with the look Drew gave Punk after he got up, all I know is, Punk, my boy, watch out, because you got a pissed off Scotsman with a sword coming for you. But I do want to give a shout out to my boy Lewis, man, because the moment of Priest cashing in and winning the title means a lot more for him personally because he is Puerto Rican just like Priest. And this is the first Puerto Rican world champion all the way since Pedro Morales. And my dog gave a speech on our No Name Wrestling podcast right after the show on how much this meant to him. And that got me a little bit choked up, to be honest, because it's how I felt when Kofi Mania happened. And it just goes to show you just how much representation matters, not just in wrestling, but in entertainment as a whole. Everything else on this night was fun as well. The 6-man street fight was probably the worst match of the night, but I still enjoyed that. Snoop on commentary had me cracking up the entire time.
Oh, we got picnic tables? Well, hey, boo-boo, here comes Yogi Bear with the picnic tables.
AJ Styles proved that he can definitely still go, but what really needs to go is that new theme. That shit was not it at all. Randy was out here RKOing the dog shit out of Speed, and that had me freaking crying. I can't wait to see Mr. Beast as the Prime Bottle next year. Bayley and Io Sky had, to me, the most underrated match of both nights, and for them to have this great match after being overshadowed on SmackDown, despite Bayley being the one to win the Rumble, I'm just happy for both of them, especially Bayley. She was the one who carried the early part of the pandemic era along with Drew and Sasha Banks, and she's been taking a lot of losses these last couple years. So good for her to have this moment at WrestleMania. Easily Bayley's best match since coming back from her ACL tear, and to me, Io's best match during her title reign. And of course, the main event. Cody Rhodes, Roman Reigns, Bloodline Rules. And I don't even think I can truly do this match justice. Cody and Roman just have this undeniable chemistry in that ring. We saw it last year, and we saw it again this year. But with it being Bloodline Rules, you knew it had to get overbooked eventually. The cameos from the Usos, Solo Sikoa, John Cena, The Rock, The Undertaker were all fantastic, and they all made sense. And I'm glad I'm not the only dumbass that thought Dean Ambrose was showing up when the Shield music hit. And speaking of the Shield, Seth Rollins to me had the best cameo of them all. When he came down in that tactical vest but then immediately got knocked down by a Superman punch, I thought it was a waste at first. But then, it all made sense. After everyone else had disappeared, it was Cody, Roman, Seth, and a steel chair that Seth himself had brought down to the ring. Roman picks up the chair, and as Cody's getting up, Roman notices Seth slowly getting up with his back turned, and it all came rushing back to him. June 2nd, 2014. The one moment in Roman's career he could never let go. And instead of knocking down his actual opponent, he smacked Seth Rollins in the back with the steel chair in a moment of revenge. But then it all backfired on him and cost him everything. In the end, Seth was Cody's Shield all along. 3 Crossroads later, and the greatest title reign of the modern era was over. Imagine this timeline even 3 years ago. Who knew one of the EVPs of AEW would end up becoming the face of WWE and would be the one to dethrone Roman Reigns? When Cody lost last year, a lot of us, myself included, were so quick to say how terrible of a decision this was. But when Cody won the Rumble again, I definitely look back, and I feel like they've made the right call, especially with how the crowd erupted when he won this year. We as wrestling fans get so invested in these characters and these storylines, and when they get these big payoffs, it's just so satisfying. And here's the thing, Cody's story might be finished, but Roman's isn't, and who knows where we go from here. And that's the best part about professional wrestling. It never stops, and there's always something going on. This whole weekend just felt like a complete shift in the world of the WWE. And if this is just the beginning of what we're calling the Triple H era, then I think it's safe to say that we're well on our way to seeing possibly the greatest era in WWE history. And I'm just glad to be able to say, I'm here for it. It's been years since I've been this invested in the WWE, and it honestly makes me feel like a kid again. To quote Pat McAfee and Corey Graves, pro wrestling is back. Pro wrestling is beautiful.